Hey everyone, today's reading on meaningfulness again takes us to an intense, somewhat dark place, depending on your perspective, maybe not. That's the interesting thing, right? As a lot of times we feel obligated to attach an emotional disposition to an intellectual disposition, but that seems strange to me. Another piece of literature I used to assign in my Meaning of Life class was Shakespeare's All the World's a Stage. And a lot of people thought, oh man, that's dark, that's bleak. But is it, or is that just a matter of perspective? The same way when we talk about, Tolstoy and the inevitability of death. You're like, oh crap, but I didn't give you anything new when I said, oh, you're going to die, right? We all know that, even if sometimes we try to not really maybe think about or focus on that. It's not some astounding revelation I just shared with you there. Perhaps the same is true of what Camus has to say in the myth of Sisyphus. So the story goes, Sisyphus did something to really piss off the gods, and depending on your version of the story, determines what exactly he did. But you didn't want to make the Greek gods angry because they were very creative and they were very resourceful. And so they got together and said, what can we do to mess up Sisyphus the most? What's the worst punishment imaginable? You all are pretty creative. I'm sure you could think of a lot of things. But what they decided was the worst punishment imaginable is to have to do something futile forever. So you've probably heard of Sisyphus's plight. He's got to push a boulder up a hill. When he gets to the top, it rolls back down, and he's got to start all over for eternity. And if you think about it, yeah, the boulder might be heavy, but that's not really the punishment. If it were a tiny pebble that he had to roll up the hill forever and ever, maybe that makes it even stupider. I don't know. It certainly doesn't help the situation, right? So the problem with the situation is that it's absurd. It's a pointless, meaningless task that has to go on to no worthwhile end. But Camus, again, we're talking metaphor here, we're talking analogy, says, that's what our life is. Wake up, alarm goes off, go to school, go to work, find some recreation, go sleep, repeat, or whatever your cycle looks like. Just to what? What's the point? Just to get to it the next day. Same way you go to the grocery store and you're like, what are all these people doing here? Well, of course, they're buying groceries. Well, why are they buying groceries? Because you got to eat. Why you gotta eat? So you can live. Why you gotta live? So that you can go to work. Why? So you can make money. Why? So you can go back to the store and buy more groceries. So life seems to kind of, play these pointless cycles. And you think about salmon swimming upstream just to lay their eggs for the next salmon to go do the same thing. And you're like, what the heck is the point of that? But Camus thought, human life might be a little bit more varied, might be a little bit more diverse, but it seems a lot like it follows that same pattern. Procreating is just passing it on to the next generation, right? What am I going to do? I'm going to get old enough and settle down. Not me personally, but what games do some of us play, right? I'm going to go have children, and then what are they going to do? They're going to look for a meaning in their life and not be able to find it. And so what will they do to find it? They'll go have children who can then go have children who can then go have children. And why? Just because it's what we do, right? We're just playing the human game. And so human existence can look really absurd from that perspective. And absurdity, it happens anytime something is futile, something is pointless. Anytime we have our expectations maybe up here and reality is down here and there's this huge disconnect between the two, we might call something absurd. And so then the tricky question, I guess, becomes, if life is absurd, what do you do with that? Because the interesting part of the myth of Sisyphus is the very end, where Camus says one must imagine Sisyphus happy. So wait, how can we be happy if life is absurd? How can Sisyphus be happy when all he does is the same pointless task forever and ever? And that's the question that I'm challenging you with today. Well, I guess two parts. One, do we agree that life is absurd or follows these absurd cycles? And two, if so, is that something that we have to attach a negative emotional disposition to? Or is that really not a good or a bad thing, but a neutral thing? Or is it a potential source of happiness? So how might an absurd existence actually be a happy one? Give that some thought, and I'll be really curious to hear what you think.